we're ready. I didn't mean to be part of the entertainment, sorry about that. I think we're good. I still feel like this is going to fall on. Okay, let me get this going. Okay, here we go. All right, so we're kind of taken up where we left off in the sense that I mentioned that value and measuring value, one of the reasons for measuring value is to choose from among services and to decide whether a new service is really worth it to your constituents, to your institution, to the people that you serve. And of course, one of the new services, newish services for a lot of libraries revolves around research data services. And I say one, it's not really one. And if I had to make any message today, that's the main message, that research data services are a suite of services. And you don't have to do all or nothing. Libraries can choose where it fits within their capabilities, within their mission of which kinds of research data services they offer. So I'm going to talk about lots of different services around research data and show you what some libraries are doing. I think that I should acknowledge where, first acknowledge where the information is coming from, and also I will define some terms like I did this morning as well. So the work that in research data that I've been working with research data for about a little over, well, about a decade. About the NSF sponsored del1 project is now in its 8th year, but we started writing the proposal, getting the interdisciplinary team together about 10 years ago. And I am co-lead of the del1 usability and assessment working group. What our goal is in that working group is to do usability testing of the del1 cyber infrastructure and also do assessment of stakeholders' needs. So it's the assessment of what do earth and environmental scientists need in terms of research data services. So my examples will come out of a lot of, for scientists, will come out of a lot of the work we've done for del1. So it's earth and environmental science data. And the project is building a cyber infrastructure for discovery of earth and environmental sciences information all over the world, as well as helping to build a culture of data sharing among scientists. So examples are there, but it could be true with other kinds of sciences as well. It's just that's what my experience in data is. The other group, and when I talk about libraries, it was done in conjunction, the work that I'm talking about was done in conjunction with LIBR, the International Research Libraries Group. And their working group on scientific information infrastructures is the one that's really involved with research data services. And they worked together with us to do a survey of European libraries and what kinds of research data services are being offered now and will be in the future. So I will be talking about that. The results of that have been published. You may have seen that, and I'm glad to answer questions about that too, but I'll use that as the examples. Really, before we talk about it, we've got to define what we mean by research data services. So I'm going to spend some time on this because, again, I think that that's really important. Sometimes people think it means having to build from scratch a data repository. That's one kind of service, but most individual libraries will not do that. In many countries, the decision's been made to do it at a national level. So others regional, and then sometimes individual libraries do it. So it's not just that all of that's one. It's really services that go from the complete life cycle of data. That is from the data management plan, the time of thinking about data, all the way through to the preservation and archiving of data. So it's all of the steps in between. And a library may have services throughout that. There are lots of different data management life cycles, ways to depict. This is the del1 life cycle, so this is the one I'm familiar with. But we start at top with a data management plan, and then collecting the data, quality assurance, metadata, describing data, and then the preserving the data. Then begin discovery, integration, analyze, plan, you know, kind of goes the whole way. All of those steps are part of the data life cycle. A library wouldn't necessarily be involved in all of those stages. Some are, but they don't have to be. And there's different kinds of services at all of those stages too. And this is meant to depict a librarian thinking, okay? Don't worry too much about the bubbles, but the idea is that every one of those stages, every library needs to be asking, what do I do here, if anything, in terms of research data? So if I am going to help my constituents manage their research data, as is mandated perhaps by their funders, what can I do to help? So for data management plan, is it that I just show them where a data management plan example is? Do I point them to a data management planning toolkit? There's several that have been developed. The University of California in the US has developed one that a lot of people adapt and use. Or do I write the data management plan for our researchers? And all of those level of services are being offered by different libraries now. All the way from just a kind of reference, here's a link to some good data management plans, all the way to actually doing it. And that's true on all of those. In collecting data, do I get involved with a team that's collecting the data, or do I let the researchers do that and get involved at someplace else? Quality assurance and description. A lot of libraries are getting involved in metadata, and I'll show you some of that. But we get all, you have the questions, and again, you're not necessarily involved in all stages, and the level of involvement is quite different at all these stages. So I'll come back to those. So as I mentioned, the definition, full data lifecycle, it's a lot of different services, and I think it's helpful to break them down into two main categories. And the categories that I call are the informational type, the kind of traditional library helping people helping them help themselves sort of thing. Informational services, that is like helping people find an example of a data management plan or a tool. To technical, which is building a data repository or taking data sets from your constituents and preparing them for deposit in a repository. So two main kinds of services. And within those, and I'm going to go through all of these because I'm going to come back and show you what % of libraries are offering each of these. So we will cycle back, but I think it's worth mentioning them now before we cycle back. So for informational research data services, there are these three kind of go together, and they're all planning. We're kind of talking about it. So I'm calling collaboration, outreach, policy development, and discussing research data with others at your institution or other institutions. That's all a service. Now, talking about it is a pretty early stage usually, but these are all things that we've asked libraries, are you doing these? So if you have a seat at the table, trying to make a decision and help set policy in your country, in your region, in your institution, those are all a kind of service because you're involved in making decisions or helping others make decisions of what to do. So you don't have to build a repository, you might be helping others that are building the repository, informing them what your users want, for example, okay, or what seems reasonable. So those are kinds of services that libraries might be involved with. The next group of informational services, these two are again extension of a traditional reference kind of service. So that is actively offering reference help to help people find data or to cite data sets that they find. So making people aware of the data citation standards, providing information that somebody from environmental sciences say, where do I find the data I need? Helping people find data sets that they need. Okay. A lot of you have been doing this for years, but that's a kind of research or informational service. Focusing on data created by others. The creating web guides or finding aids that support this kind of service is another kind of research data service. So an environmental sciences web guide, Where is the data? What are the repositories, the trusted repositories around the world for environmental sciences data? That kind of thing would be a web guide. And then the other kinds of informational services, and I apologize, let me read these because I think people in the back, it's a little hard. Directly participating on a project. That is being a team member, the data person, the information person on a research project. Very labor intensive, a whole different level of involvement than these others, but that's something that a number of libraries are doing. Consulting on data management plans and metadata. So helping people write their data management plans, helping them create metadata for their data sets. And then the last one is training. Training other librarians, training data managers, training students on a variety of data issues. So offering courses. Okay. So those are the 8 informational kinds of things. Now, when we ask libraries about what they're doing, we don't actually label them as informational. We give them a whole long list of things and have people react to which things they offer, but we've categorized them after the fact. Technical research data services are another category, again, that we've categorized after the fact. And the first of those is providing technical support for research data systems and data repositories. So actually creating and maintaining a data repository. The next are things that have to do with preparing data for deposit and depositing data into your own repository or somebody else's. That is going around your institution and finding data that needs to be deposited. Perhaps starting with data that's funded by funders that require data deposit. Preparing the data, making sure it follows data standards, working directly with the researcher, getting the data prepared, and getting it deposited. Taking data out of a repository. By the way, that doesn't happen very often, but we ask people about it. And then the last would be metadata. Actually doing, not showing people what standard is in their field or giving a class on what is metadata and how you can do it, but actually doing it for them. Finding the data set and the library creating the metadata and depositing it. Okay. So you can see these are what I'm calling technical or more hands-on kinds of quite intense sorts of data services. Okay. So that's all background. And remember these, because I'm going to come back to these. And then I'll show you some results from our studies. Okay, so as I mentioned in the del1 project, part of the usability and assessment, part of what we do in the usability and assessment working group is we identify stakeholders for earth and environmental science data. Who might be interested in using environmental science data, or who creates it and might deposit it. And so we've got this whole group of stakeholders that are interested in some way in environmental science data, from public officials to scientists down here. The ones that have the red around them are the ones that we identified as our primary stakeholders. So we spent more effort on those because we figured if we, at these early stages, and 10 years ago, we're very early stage and we still haven't moved as fast as we might want to. We figured without the scientists who are creating the data being willing to prepare their data and share it, and to put it in an open repository, we aren't going anywhere with open data. Even if their funder says you must, doesn't mean people will. Mandates are the first step, but you got to have systems that are easy to use, or there's got to be, there's carrots and sticks, right? We've got the sticks with a mandate, but they don't have a lot of punch because a lot of people don't have anything to lose. But a carrot, if I can see it's good for me, then I might be more likely to do it. So this has got to be our first group. The people who are creating the data have to feel that it's important to share or deposit their data, and they have to feel it's okay to reuse and use data. That's the primary. Libraries and librarians we identified as our second most important stakeholder in this whole business because of all of the places where data could be shared, preserved, made available, where people could learn about metadata and all of that. Libraries, particularly research libraries, seem the logical place to do it. That libraries, you know, a librarian, when you say metadata, doesn't go, huh, what? You know, or whatever, or what's that, or I don't care, or that's not important. Because, you know, in a library, you know why metadata. You know that good description will help people, will help good retrieval. And so you have that link in your mind. It's kind of second nature that you know. And so libraries are a logical place to help in some of these. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about data managers, but I have them circled there because they overlap with both scientists. Some data managers are in the lab, or somebody designated in the lab and are scientists, and some of the data managers are in the libraries, and they overlap there. And those all three work together. So I'll tell you about some of those. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to talk about scientists. So part of the del1 assessment tasks are we do regular surveys and analysis and assessments of our primary groups. So we are now on our third assessment of scientists over 8 years, and we've done 3 of libraries. So I'll give you show you how those two things kind of tie together. So for the scientist survey, the first was done published in 2011, and PLOS One, so it's easy to find. It's open access. It's been used a lot. We were talking about views earlier. It's been viewed and cited quite a bit. The second one is also in PLOS One, so it's really easy if you go there. And with my name, if you put in my name, there's nobody else with my name, so that's a good retrieval mechanism. And the second one was published in 2015. I was hoping to give you results from the 2017. We closed it this summer, and then we weren't real happy with the response rate, and we reopened. So the 2017 will see the light of day in 2018 probably. We're analyzing now. I've looked at the data a little bit, so I can comment on it if we want. But so anyway, so most of my comments will be about the 15 data. And I'm just going to cherry pick. I'm just going to take a few things from that, but really show some opportunities for libraries and for other, in universities and research organizations, some collaboration with libraries and research offices and things. So again, just a few things. So if we go back to that data life cycle, researchers really, for the most part, don't think about that whole life cycle. They are very busy. Now, they didn't used to think so much about data management plans. They might have planned their trip to the desert. This person studies desert tortoises. You know, her planning might be getting there and deciding what kind of data she was going to collect. But now a lot of funders require a formal data management plan. So this formal way of thinking of it is fairly new for a lot of researchers. So now they have to formally think, and a lot of them say, oh my gosh, what, data management plan, what am I supposed to put in there? Okay. They were busy really thinking about collecting the data, making sure it was good, quality assurance, and then analyzing it. Some modelers and things think of integration with other data sets and sometimes the discovery. So sometimes these, but really most of those others. There has not been a tradition for researchers to think about describing it except for themselves, but not describing it in a way that meets some kind of standard, like a metadata standard. That wasn't something that really has been in researchers' minds too much. And preserving for future use, their preservation has really been more focused on their own use. I've written the paper, and I might write another, but when you ask where they keep it, it's often, well, I keep it used to be in my desk drawer, now it's on my hard drive, or, it isn't that idea of preservation has not been big in their mind. So immediately, if you just look at behavior and motivation and purpose, a researcher's purpose is not down here. A researcher's purpose is to collect data and make sense of it, provide new knowledge. These other things help and may be required by their funder, but there's some real opportunities here for libraries whose purpose is to describe and preserve. And that's something we understand. And so helping the whole research process by focusing on these parts of the cycle is an immediate opportunity for a library, and why libraries make sense. So we ask a lot of behavioral questions in our assessments because we started kind of early on, before most scientists were preserving or describing. So we had to start kind of, hi, what do you think about it? And what would you do it if you're not doing it? And why would you and why wouldn't you? In terms of saving and preserving. So we have found that there is this overall view, and this has gone up between 2011 and 2015, that lack of access to data is bad, or access to data is good if you want to turn it over. This has been a change, I think, in the way people think. 3/4 of the people who responded to our 2015 survey agreed or strongly agreed with the statement that lack of access to data, to others' data, is a major impediment to progress in science. So there's this feel, this from 3/4 anyway, that lack of access is bad, so you know, there's kind of willingness. And a half of them say that it's restricted their own personal ability. So they have a personal feeling that not being able to get to data is a problem. So I show this just because it shows kind of a willingness, an open-mindedness, not by everybody, okay, but this kind of growing awareness that research data is a collective good. We know that articles are part of the scientific record, but the data that lies behind them and behind science, there is a growing realization, is something that is also should be accessible. We ask them, are you willing to share? Are you willing to place all of your data in a central repository? Or are you willing to place at least some of your data? Okay, so all, that's under half. But over 80% said at least some. When we started talking about research data 10 years ago, there were a lot of evangelists. Gotta get everything, gotta get all, I say some would be pretty good, okay? Some is better than none. Don't set up you set up a data repository and say you have to put all of your data in here. That was kind of, a researcher is gonna, no. There's lots of reasons they might not want to put all. Might be that it's sensitive data. It might be that they're not real confident in the quality. They have lots of reasons, and I'll show you some more of those. But if we can get some data, there's a fair number of researchers who are willing to place their data into a central repository. Now you notice that up at the top, my headline said share, but the question we asked was place. We found early on that sharing is could be a dirty word. We always think of sharing, kind of positive. But we found with some of our interviews that people thought of, like when their mother told them to share with their baby brother, I give up and I got less than I had and I don't get anything for it. So we try to avoid, when I'm talking to scientists, I try not to use the word share. Okay? So place it in the data and then try to show them what they can get to. So reciprocity is, this idea that by putting your data in, you'll get access to your own data. What happens 10 years from now, you want to look at your old data. You'll get access to it too, and then others will, and you can get access to other people's data. So it's not all giving, it's also giving. So a little psychology goes a long way here. There's also what I call the gap between willingness to share and accessibility. So we did use the share word here. We asked, do you share your data now? And 80% said yes, but we asked, can others access your data easily? And less than half said yes. So 80% said, yeah, I share. But can they get it easily? No. And there are two ways to interpret the easily. One is easily is that's good. They can't get it easily. Okay, because it's my data, right? And I'm sharing. So if they ask me, and if I trust them, I will send them my data. Okay, so I'll share it, but we got to go through a lot of hoops. The other way to interpret data easily is, oh, that's too bad. You know, how can it maybe make the process easier? And libraries can help in both, with both technical capabilities as well as psychology. So easily, in the good sense, is by helping, whether you're building the systems or helping those who are building data repositories, having good retrieval systems which are based on good metadata. So making the process easier by better system design and by better description. So that's the positive. We're used to this. This is what we do. The other part is maybe a little less comfortable. But to know they can't get it easily because I don't, you know, they shouldn't. I only want bona fide researchers or whatever to get it. Is by allowing, if you're building a repository or helping people choose a repository to put their data, is to talk about the idea of access controls. Now for some people that makes them very uncomfortable. It should be open, freely open to everybody. But if I'm an environmental scientist that is my data has geolocation codes for endangered species, I don't want everybody to see that. I don't want the poachers to see that. I don't want the, you know, there's some. So sometimes access controls are okay. And some systems will allow some access controls. People have to register to get access to the data. They can see the metadata, but to get access to the data, they have to register. So sometimes thinking practically, or it could be human subjects data, which is restricted in terms of use, and you want to make sure that the people who are using it. So think think beyond just open, completely open for all data is necessary. The other place where I see libraries that real some of the data from scientists shows a real opportunity for libraries is metadata. We asked what metadata standard do you currently use to describe your data? And there is a very, very long tail. We gave them a lot of lists and plus other, and there's all different standards. You don't get alphabet soup here, but Dublin Core, you probably recognize, Darwin Core in Earth Environmental Science, and a whole bunch, ISO standard, there's a whole bunch. The biggest bar there is whatever my lab tells me to do, okay, the lab standard or my institution, that's the biggest. But the real biggest is that's none. And a couple people were brave. In the open-ended comments they said, what's metadata? Okay, so they were brave enough to ask. I think some of these none are probably had that same question. And then some of the people just skipped this question, and I think they were also like, they just didn't know what it was. Again, it's not necessarily their business to know. I mean, we need to inform them about the idea of good description, but this has gotten a little better between 2011 and 15, but not much. It's still. So here's, again, a big opportunity. We also ask, if you don't share your data or you don't make your data available, why not? So these are the barriers. We let people choose multiple ones. Why don't you share? I need to publish first is the #1 reason in 2015, and I suspect it's going to also be in 2017. People, especially people building their career, young folks, they're afraid if they put their data in an open repository too early that others will scoop them. Not necessarily true, but it could happen. So again, here's an idea of separating the idea of preservation from sharing. Let's get it saved. You've spent years, you've spent your career so far collecting this data. Let's not take a chance of it losing it. You've got it on a USB drive. You might lose that, okay? Or your home computer, which may die. Let's preserve it in our repository, or I'll help you find a repository at one that will allow you to put a 1-year embargo, for example. So embargoes in this case don't necessarily a bad word, because we've got the preservation function as well as the sharing, and we need to think about both of those. So if you can preserve it, even with a 1-year embargo, that's better than not at all. And that overcomes a lot of these psychological barriers of I need to publish first. Some of the others are also solvable by things that libraries can do. So we've got insufficient time, lack of funding, no place to put the data, insufficient skills. Okay, those are all things that you can help them with. Okay? You don't have the skills, I'll teach you. Or you don't have the skills, I'll do it for you. Again, depending on what level of involvement makes sense in your situation. So you don't know about metadata, no problem. Let me show you. You don't know about metadata, here's a good metadata editor that'll help you. You don't have to know about the standard, this one follows the standard. Okay. No place to put it? No problem. We don't have an institutional repository, but there's one nationally in Norway. Is there one nationally in Norway? I should know that before. Yeah, there's a national. In Finland, there are 2 national repositories, one for social science, one for science. Doesn't matter, we don't have to have one, we'll help you get it in. So there is a place to put it, we just have to help you find. And the same with time, and they don't have the funding to do it, well, we'll help you. That's really a time thing.
Can I ask what you mean by lack of funding? They don't need funding to share their...
Yeah, well, they think they do, because they really don't have the staff to do it.
Oh, yeah,
So it really goes with time.
Okay, yeah.
I don't have money to hire somebody to do it. Okay. So the library is here to help you. Yeah, so a researcher says, I gotta hire a student to do it, and I can't, I don't have the money. Lack of standards, again, that's an education thing. You can help solve that, there are standards, so helping people find those. Some of them are a little more difficult. People do not need my data is what the whole thing. And that may be an education thing. You know, my reaction to that is if people don't need the data, why did you spend the time collecting it, you know? But you probably don't want to say that, right? Okay, but you know, that may just be perception. Don't have the rights, that may actually be true, and that could be a barrier. That it's data that was, it could be this, again, human subjects, and you're not allowed to. So sometimes that's true, that's the all or none. So you can't get all of the data. So most of these, a lot of these are the top barriers. Libraries can help solve, and data managers can help solve, or you can help people see the way to the solution to those. Some other barriers that don't come up here, but that I hear a lot in interviews are things like people may misinterpret my data. It came further down, but I think that people really think about that. If I put my data out there, they're going to do something nefarious with it, or they're going to find that they're going to try to replicate my study and can't, and they're going to claim I did something wrong. There is that anxiety. Those are a little harder because it may, you know, most of the arguments go the good outweighs the bad. If the one bad thing happened to you, it's hard to look at the full good. So some of those are psychological. But again, some access restrictions on some data that's likely to be misinterpreted. So very sensitive data that there are special interest groups that are going to try to take parts of the data, and you know, like climate change is sometimes controversial, and they don't want somebody just pulling out 2 points of their data, ignoring the rest, and claiming that their results or something. So you know, some of that is difficult to answer. But so you will run into those concerns as well. So I've already mentioned this, but this is kind of the background of why we think libraries are a logical place to play an active role in a variety of kinds of research data services. And this is, you guys know this, but when I talk to a group of administrators in an institution, or a group of scientists, this is an important kind of message to make. Well, especially if they don't really understand what the library does, or they have an old-fashioned kind of view. It's, you know, why should the library be involved? Well, because the library is one place in an organization that really understands interdisciplinary work. You serve all disciplines. Or within, if you're a specialized library, you serve everybody in your unit. And so this idea of understanding this wide view of knowledge. And collections and services have all done that. Again, I already mentioned, you know, you don't go, we mentioned metadata, right? Okay, you know, you're comfortable with that concept. You know how to find stuff about data. So you know how to help people find where the repositories are, where the standards are, where the standard for data citation, where the standards for data quality, where, you know, you can help people find the information about data. We make the point a lot, and I make the point to you too, in partnership with other administrative units. Research data services, that whole suite, is way too big for from one department or one group. It really needs to be a partnership. If you're in a discipline where there are lots of funders, if you're serving researchers who get funding from Wellcome Trust, the European Commission, a variety of, from government agencies, they are required now to not only have a data management plan, but to make their data available in a repository. They have to. Well, they're told they have to. And so it's a big deal. And so it means working with research offices and lots. It is a partnership. It's not just the library. So to find out what libraries are doing and kind of project into the future, we've done this just like with scientists. We've done this ongoing group of library surveys. And I mentioned that I'm going to talk about the European survey, but as background, it was the third one we've done. The first two were done in Canada and the US. These were done with the Association of College and Research Libraries, not ARL, but the one that Megan Oakley works on with, ACRL. So these are all sizes and types of academic libraries. So it's a little different group here. But the first one, there's an ACRL white paper that you can find on the web, open, and the other is in Journal of eScience Librarianship, which again is an open access journal. So we did North American, well, Canada, US, 12 and 15, to find out what libraries are doing. And then Liber asked us to replicate that in Europe. So this has just come out in Liber Quarterly in 2017. We did a survey of Liber members. Liber members are research libraries. They're closer to ARL, Association of Research Libraries. So we get asked all the time, compare US with Europe. Well, the US, first of all, we're older, and there are different kinds of libraries. There's small ones and big ones. So I can do it informally, because I can pull out the research libraries from others, but I hesitate to do a formal, you know, US is doing, or Canada and the US are doing this, and Europe is doing this, because it's not an exact match. So I'm just going to present the European results. So the Liber membership is spread out. We use the open air categories for where countries fit. We did promise that we would not make the results by country. Okay. But this is the membership, is open air categories. So 15% of Liber members are in the north. Clearly you fit in the north. 53% west, 17% south, and 16% in the east. And our response rate, we got about 36% response rate, but it pretty closely matches. Little underrepresentation in the south, but little overrepresentation in the north, but pretty close. So we didn't weight the responses. We felt this was close enough. It's pretty well distributed. We had some notable exceptions. Liber did say distributed in English should be no problem. It was a problem in France. So we didn't get any responses from France. So this is Liber membership except France, okay? So, but otherwise we got pretty good response here. So I want to make three points about that and be aware of time here. The first is the range of services and by those categories I showed you, and then look at staff skill development, because that, of course, is still a real concern, is getting the people who can do it. So let me first show the range of services. We gave people those long lists and asked if they were doing them. So this is in order by most likely to be offered across Europe. So over three quarters say they are discussing research data services with others. A lot of talking going on, which is good, because again, that involves others. It involves other libraries, involves other departments within your institution. So it's getting the conversation started. It's working on plans, and that's good. There's a lot more of that in Europe than we observed in the US and Canada, so congratulations, there is more of it. A lot of, 2/3 involved in developing policy, which again is kind of the next stage. So the rules, the plans, the policy, you must deposit your data in an open repository, and here's how you do it, those kinds of things. So making those plans and policy. About half say they're training their colleagues on research data services, and I think that's really good. I think not everybody has to initiate the training. If half are training, then the other half can take advantage of the training, you know, so this is good. About half, again, are doing consulting on data management plans. And then we've got consulting on data and metadata and outreach or collaboration. You will notice that those all fit in the category of consultative or informational. Those are informational services or consultative kinds of services. No technical here in those first. The next group, we dropped down quite a bit. 38% of libraries down to a quarter. So 38% are providing tech support, and that's the first time the technical comes out. So slightly over 1/3 of the libraries in Europe are now doing tech support, and we asked specifically what kind, and it's building a repository or providing storage for a repository. So it is the technical end of the repository kind of thing. And then we go back to consultative or informational, web guides, research, etc. About 1/3 are doing direct participation with research groups. That, again, is very labor intensive, being the data person on a research team. Very, very high profile, but very labor intensive. And then identifying data sets for deposit is only about 1/4. Now, I already mentioned that consultative or informational are more commonly offered than technical, and this looks like a lot, but trust me, the color coding is all you really need here. So these are the same categories I just showed you. Okay, 77%, get out of the way, discussing, same things. The blue means they're doing it now, so that's exactly what I just showed you. The green means that they plan to within the next 2 years. Okay, same services all the way from discussing RDS down to direct participation with researchers. These are just the consultative or the informational. The red means not doing and not planning to do. So what you can see, with the exception of direct participation with researchers, that really labor-intensive one-on-one sort of thing, most libraries in Europe who responded to the survey are going to be offering a fair range of consultative, informational kinds of services. Now, I should say, survey, we had 36% response rate. Those who are doing it are more likely to respond than those who are not. So this is an optimistic view. Do remember that, and I'm quite aware of that. But the idea is that there's a lot of planning going on. This is a hot topic right now. So if a lot of you are in the conversation, join the conversation. If you're not, and get involved in this. You do not have to offer all of these. You can just say, my level of involvement will be as one person, the library representative on a data policy team. Or we're going to create web guides, or we're going to use web guides somebody else created and make them available. Okay, so you pick and choose from here. For the technical type services, the picture's slightly different. Still, the blue are what people are doing now. The green are what they plan to in the next 2 years, and the red is have no plans to. So 1/4, slightly more than 1/4, have no plans to offer any technical services at all. And again, that's fine. It doesn't make sense for every library to do all of that. You can point somebody to something else. For some, that makes sense. For others, for big ones, for leaders, it makes sense to do them all. So pick what makes sense. The one exception over here, that most are not, 2/3 are not going to do almost, is that deaccessioning, taking data out. And it's we got to get data in before we start taking it